Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Andy and today I'm super excited to share my deck building experience with you. I bought my first fixer-upper home in 2018 and after a few completed projects on the inside in the first year, I felt like I was ready to add a 14 by 16 foot deck onto the back to maximize the amount of hangout spaces. The idea was conceptualized in March of 2019 using Lowe's free deck designer software. I'm not sponsored yet, but it was super easy to use and I'd recommend it to anyone. I was planning to build the deck around the existing enclosed porch and nearly making it the full width of the house and having its stairs come down from the right to the left into the yard. So that's what I submitted to my borough in order to get my permit. This way when I go to sell the house, there's a record that it was built properly and up to code. This is what it looked like before. I don't have a ton of pictures of it, but it was pretty unusable as you can see. The concrete pad was cracked, the steps were falling apart, and that part of the yard was fairly slanted and not good for much. So I started demo on May 19th, 2019. I rented an electric jackhammer from Home Depot and enlisted the help of a friend, plus 2 more helpers, because this was a lot of concrete to move. I ended up leaving the good part of the pad and the few stairs at the top, simply because the deck was going to cover them up in the end. For this project, I used pressure-treated pine across the board. I took countless trips to the motherland, Home Depot, for all the materials used in this build, and every single trip was made in my Hyundai Sonata, so don't tell me you need a truck to do this kind of project. I used 2x10s for all the joists and beams, 4x6 for the support posts, 4x4s for the railing posts, 2x4s for the railing, 2x2 spindles for the balusters, 5/4 decking for the surface boards, 2 to 3 inch deck screws, and a ton of other various hardware components. You'll see that all the work was done with about 8 main tools. Those included a tape measure, framing square, level, drill, impact driver, circular saw, miter saw, and oscillating sander. All in, this project only cost about $3,500 to $4,000 back in 2019. I was able to keep the cost down by doing absolutely all the work myself. Well, with a couple other helpers. 5 years later, and this same project would cost more today with lumber prices up slightly and overall inflation hitting harder right now. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I knew it was gonna look dope. I had my dad there helping every step of the way, and he is a retired union carpenter, so his knowledge and free labor was super helpful throughout. Other than his involvement and various help from others along the way, be it ideas or free labor, I was relying fully upon my own curiosity and research abilities, which usually manifested themselves in endless hours of YouTube videos from channels like Home Renovating DIY, Third Coast Craftsman, Premier Outdoor Living, This Old House, DIY with Pete, and Lowe's and Home Depot's channels. This was definitely a learn on the go kind of project. After checking with our local 811 before digging, we poured 12 10-inch by 36-inch concrete footers. For our area, they had to be 36-inch minimum to be below the frost line and prevent racking. Those were brutal to dig, and I did it by hand using a manual post hole digger and a digging bar. For the framing, we went with half attached and half floating deck, meaning it's only attached to the house with about an 8-foot ledger board. The remaining width of the deck is floating because we didn't want to tie it into the brick porch and possibly wouldn't even have been structurally allowed to anyways. We started on the side with the ledger board and worked our way out from there, digging post holes and setting 4x6 posts, double 2x10 beams, and 2x10 joists as we went. The longest part of the deck ended up being over 24 feet, and we split that up over 3 separate beams so our joists wouldn't span more than 8 feet on any given section. This is over-engineered, but it will put off sagging until much later in the deck's lifespan. You'll notice that a lot of this project was over-engineered. That's just how me and my dad are. One important thing we needed to prepare for was the joist layout. My plan from the beginning was to offset the deck boards on a 45-degree angle and put a picture frame around the entire edge. That meant I needed to have extra joists and blocking in the right places to accept those boards down the road. In my area, hurricane ties are required to secure joists to the beam, and while I had them in place, they were only installed with deck screws when they should have been installed with structural screws. They're 2 different things, so learn from me, as my inspector made me redo about 200 screws worth. Accuracy during the framing process is extremely important because it sets the foundation for everything that comes later. For example, we kept a consistent fall of about 1/4 inch for every foot so water would drain away from the house. It's things like this that you have to plan for at this point in the project. And as you can see, my neighbor accidentally set off a bunch of fireworks in his garage during this part of the build. Wow. We framed everything all the way out, but left the stairs until later in the project. As the last step for the frame, we added joist tape to give them a longer life. We're about 2 months in now, and it's near the end of July 2019 at this point. This is when we started laying our deck boards. One cool idea I gotta give my father-in-law credit for was his strategy for laying down wet deck boards. So all pressure treated lumber comes pretty wet from big box stores like Home Depot and Lowe's, meaning it's actually still full of moisture and will naturally dry out and shrink down to its final size over the course of a few months. Well, he came up with a system where you can cut down that wait time to 0. For this to work, you butt your wet deck boards up against each other and only screw down one side, the same side of each board across the whole deck. So as they dry, they shrink into themselves and form a consistent 1/8 to 1/4 inch gap to allow water and air to pass through. I didn't buy my boards months in advance, nor did I have the space to allow them to fully dry out, so this strategy works super well. You just have to come back later and secure the other side of all the boards once they've shrunken down to size. There are a couple other important factors when choosing and laying out your deck boards. First off, try your best to be picky and choose the straightest, driest boards you can at the store. It'll save you time later on. Second, when you're laying out your boards, make sure to have the crown of the wood facing up. Jeff Thorman of Home Renovating DIY taught me that if the crown is down, it will have a tendency to curl up over time, pulling on your screws, which will create this cupping effect that traps water, looks bad, and is rougher to walk on. So put the top of the crown or rainbow facing up, and your boards will stay flat as they dry. We finished with the picture frame boards, and the decking surface was complete. We were into mid-August by now, about 3 months into the project, when we moved on to the railing. I had already set up the posts approximately 4 feet apart based on code requirements. That meant I was going to have a total of 21 posts. The main thing I would suggest with the post is leaving every other one at least 7 feet tall to hold some lights or something like we did. It worked out really wonderfully in the end. From there, we notched every single post, twice, to accept the 2x4 rail boards that the balusters will connect to. This got messy, as you can see, because it involved several cuts with a circular saw to form each notch, so sawdust was flying everywhere. I chose to go simple on the railing design and just buy approximately 180 balusters from Lowe's, attach them each with one screw on top and one on the bottom, and call it a day. These will prove tedious to stain later, but it was way cheaper than any sort of metal or cable railing system, and the look of it is just classic. We capped our railings with a full 5.5 inch 5/4 decking board all the way around for a nice wide place to lean or set a drink. The last piece we tackled was the full set of stairs. After the math was mathing, we created the stringers from 3 2x12 by 16. We needed 3 because these go 16 inches on center just like joists, and we were making these stairs 4 feet wide to accommodate someone coming up and down at the same time. We got these in place and added some gravel and pavers as our final landing spot at the bottom of the stairs. These have since shifted over time, so next time I would pour a concrete pad instead. We added the railing to the stairs, and those were the last pieces of wood to be added to the deck. It was now October 2019, 5 months into the project, and the next thing we worked on was adding electrical. I didn't have any exterior electrical boxes outside on the back side of my house, but I did have one in my storage room under the back porch. So I spliced in some Romex cable that would be used to add 2 weather-tight outlet boxes up on the deck using conduit to run them under the joists. And just like that, we had power. That enabled us to string up our Edison lights that we love. It also allowed us to hook up the projector for movie nights and football watch parties that my wife, girlfriend at the time, Angela, and I were looking forward to so much. That first year, we ended up with a sectional set from Wayfair, a large cantilevered umbrella as a gift from my parents, and a deck box from Home Depot to store our cushions and electric blankets. The grill we already had also got a dedicated new spot on this deck. That concluded the work for this year because by now it was late October in Pennsylvania and it was getting too cold to do much else. One thing you're probably noticing is that I never stained and sealed it, and you'd be right to point that out. That was intentional because the wood, while somewhat dry, should really be given a full year to dry completely before sealing it. So I was always going to wait until next year for that first stain and sealer coat. So next summer rolls around and it's 2020 now. The pandemic is in full swing at this point, but the drinks were flowing with my family on Memorial Day, and we actually made a big decision to add one major step to the whole project. We were going to turn this useless back room into an open air porch again. It was not providing much use for us except as a pass-through and a place to throw empty Amazon boxes, and on top of that we figured out that it was originally an open air porch that got bricked in at some point. So I got right to work prepping for some more demo. We began the back room demo by installing an exterior door in what was previously an interior door opening. Then we were able to tear out the interior wall framing from this room. With all that gone, we were able to start smashing bricks. This part was hard work but quite therapeutic. Since all this brick would be considered clean fill, we borrowed a truck, built a ramp to slide all the material down into the truck bed, and dumped it elsewhere. All of this demo exposed the original insul brick wrapping on the house that I would later have to cover up with matching siding. It also left us without framing on the left side of our kitchen window that would eventually have to be added, and our knee walls didn't have any cap on them that would eventually have to be molded and poured. Demo was quick, but by the end of June 2020 we had an open air back porch. Now it was time to refinish the entire space. First steps had to involve sealing up the house to protect it from the elements. That meant adding a screen door. That also meant sourcing 4-inch aluminum siding with some wood grain in it to match the rest of the newly painted house. It took some searching, but I found some right in my own city that I was able to pick up in my Sonata. This was a whole new endeavor because I had never really metalworked before, but it ended up looking seamless. The wall caps were also something that were made during this time. I created forms for the different sizes I would need and poured those while continuing to work on the rest of the deck and porch. I'm not proud of this, but it took all the way until September 2020 to get the first coat of stain and sealer on the deck. I ended up going with a semi-transparent mixture of 3 parts pecan to 1 part black walnut from TWP, Total Wood Preservative. They primarily sell online, and from what I could tell, they were tops in the stain and sealer game. My dad and Uncle Gary were the only souls nice enough to come help me tackle staining all 180 spinches. Then I was able to work through staining the easier deck surfaces throughout the short remainder of the summer. I was only able to get to the top and sides of the deck. The underside would have to wait until the following summer. And that concluded the work for 2020 as it was getting too cold again. The summer of 2021 was now here, and to be honest, Ange and I mostly used this time to enjoy the new outdoor space. There was still work to be done, but we wanted to enjoy the fruits of our labor with ourselves and our family and friends. The remaining work included staining the underside and giving the surface one more coat, which I did around August. Then in September 2021, I finally rented a 10-foot metal brake from Home Depot and bought a roll of white aluminum to tackle rewrapping the fascia boards of the porch and creating a new frame for the window. As one of the final steps, I painted the siding to match the rest of the house, and with that, my project I started in May of 2019 finally came to its conclusion. After 3 summers of work, Ange and I have an amazing space to host family and friends, or just have movie nights for ourselves. Getting this 14 by 16 deck built up from scratch took only 5 months and went way faster than expected. But then the subsequent work that created for me went a lot slower over the course of the next 2 summers. It's everything I thought it would be and more though. The total cost for the project ended up being somewhere in the $3,500 to $4,000 range, and it was totally worth putting in the time to do it. Thank you to everyone who helped out, especially my dad, who was probably there an average of 3 days a week for the entire first summer. I couldn't have done any of this without him. Other thank yous go out to my buddy Matt for helping with the initial demo, Uncle Gary who helped with staining, my father-in-law for being a sounding board throughout the process, and my wife, then girlfriend, Ange, for helping to furnish it and giving up quality time with me so I could complete this. It took many late nights after work, but I'm so happy I did it. Now I just need to recoat the surface every 3rd year or so like I'm doing right now in 2024, and that deck should last me 20, 30, 40 years. Thanks to everyone who's followed along or subscribed as a result of watching this deck building series. I'll be creating more content like this over the coming months and plan to keep growing this channel. So thanks for following along on my woodworking journey.